Quinn, is this right? We would need to have the agenda amended to move the approval of the minutes to the bottom portion of the meeting.
You can go ahead and approve the minutes, and then you can go ahead and make a motion later on to change them again if you want. Now it's just really a matter of whatever you guys want to do. If you want to go ahead and knock it out and approve them, then that's fine. But I mean, I don't really see much point in doing that if she's just gonna want to change them again. You know.
Let's just wait till she gets on.
Yeah.
I want to give her that opportunity to say what those changes are. I don't need anybody to think that the ship is running without them. You know what I mean? Right. Everybody's part of this deal.
Yeah, I think that's probably the right thing to do.
Mark, how are you, sir?
Doing okay, yeah?
Doing well, doing well. And there's the fabulous Miss Allison Davis. Doctor.
How are you?
Fine, how are you?
Good. I was looking at Sharon's face and I thought, gosh, she looks so familiar, and I realized you're on the commercial, aren't you?
Yes.
I was like, I feel like we're friends. I was like, wait, no, I actually know you from TV. Okay.
That means we know each other. We're already friends.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you so much, Allison, for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad to be here. I hear one of my good friends is going to be with you all next week.
Yep, Daryl.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, we're an interesting bunch, those of us who traffic around in economic development together, but we're a necessary bunch. We make a lot of good things happen for communities. We really do. And Daryl's been at it a long time. I mean, he's been at it a long time.
He is. I think in the last 2 months, he is my most contacted person. We text like 18 times a day. Yeah, he's a good person.
Oh, he is.
And he's connected and he's thoughtful. So I'm thankful.
I just got an email from him. Let me see if I can find it.
I shared the PowerPoint that I did today with him.
Did you?
So that he knew what I was going to cover. Yeah.
Okay. He sent me an email. It's a webinar that I think we both should get on. It is Race and Economic Development, the Great Reset, #3. Yeah.
Oh, from Gazelle. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. They actually do a really nice job with their webinars.
Yeah.
We just bought Gazelle for the state.
Okay.
Yeah, they sucked me in with their marketing employee. I totally fell for it, like hook, line, and sinker. I was like, darn it. I couldn't believe it. Yeah.
This is going to be an interesting conversation.
Yes, I think so. I'm excited for it.
Sharon, did you see Patrice's email?
Yes, I'm looking at it now.
As we deal with the minutes, you want to just share that? Because that gives us a chance to deal with it right at the beginning.
Yes. Let's see.
Mr. Tyra, how are you today?
I'm doing fine. How are you, Anthony?
I'm doing well, man.
How's everybody else?
They're good. I'm hoping that they stay quiet while they're in here.
Well, you can bet I will be. I'm going to be listening the first time because just see what's going on.
Well, you have seen the desired outcomes document, right?
I have. I got it right here in front of me. Yes. I see where you gave me
your assignment. Yeah. Just making sure you got your assignment, Doc. You're already in the process of doing that, you know?
Yeah, I've got that grant processes and other things going, so I'm not too worried about that, but we'll see how it goes.
Anything you can share on that today? That might be good if you're ready.
Absolutely not.
Okay. All right. All right. Hi, Kim.
Hello.
Nice work, you and Patrice.
We had, I swear 3 hours went by so quickly. And we were sitting outside and it was close to 90 degrees, but we were going through it.
I'm impressed that you all did 90 degrees for 3 hours. That you really are committed if you do that kind of activity.
It's like I said, it seemed like it just flew by though.
Yeah, that's great. You all did good. So it's nice to be able to start checking some things off, right? That's good.
Absolutely.
Hey folks, I'm gonna drop off the video, but if you need me, just yell for me. I'll be watching. Okay. Thank you.
Hey Quinn, real quick before you leave, is there a way to wave hands? What I think I want to do during the presentation is maybe have people hold their questions to the
Under
end.
reactions.
Can you do it?
Yeah, you should be able to raise your hand.
Under reactions.
Yeah, you go to reactions and then, yeah, it should be there.
Allison, would that be okay with you if folks have questions during the presentation?
Look at my thumbs up, Anthony.
I like it. I see it.
And I'm clapping.
I thought you were just playing with the buttons.
How do you take it down?
I don't know.
It'll just go away.
It will. Okay. Well, that's just obnoxious now.
Yeah, see?
Okay.
Hey, Mark, while I've got you on here as well, I was talking to one of my coworkers at Toyota that might be able to shed some additional light on the skilled trades piece. If you'd like me to connect you with her.
That would be wonderful.
And I know there is another organization called ACE Mentoring that we've been involved with for a while. But I'll send you her email. And she's been very involved with getting people involved in skilled trades through Toyota and also just through some other avenues. So
That's great, Kim.
And I told her that I would be doing that and to be expecting something from you.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Mark, I have some information that I can give you as well. Back in the days when I was there at the city, worked on something for apprenticeship, so I'll share it with you.
Okay, great.
We've got 13 people on. There's not 13 pictures, so who's hiding? Turn your cameras on.
Anthony, everybody who accepted the meeting invitation is on.
Daryl, what is that funky background you have, sir?
I'm gonna turn my picture off and then you'll be able to see it. It's an equity logo that has all the functioning systems within my office that make equity turn.
Yeah.
So if you look at it in detail, you'll see our equity statement, the 4 tenets of our equity statement embedded, which is process, access, outcomes, and inclusion. And then on the outside, you'll see culture responsive teaching and learning, restorative practice, family and community engagement, educating boys of color, all the things that drive our system within my office is a logo that we created.
Very nice.
A lot of detail there. Thanks.
I'm glad we got that on the record so people can actually hear that. That's nice.
It's Rochelle Dodson. I'll be on video in just a moment. I'm just finishing up my lunch.
I got you. How you doing today?
Just great. How about you?
Doing well.
Well, we know that Patrice is gonna be jumping on the call. She's trying to charge up. So she'll be jumping on the call maybe a little bit late. Does it look like everybody else is here?
Everybody's here who's accepted the meeting request. So I think it's okay to go ahead and get started, and Patrice can jump on as soon as she's ready.
Okay. So good morning again, or good afternoon, everyone. This is a great Friday morning for us to be joining today. This is our third Education and Economic Opportunity Subcommittee meeting for, of course, the Mayor's Commission for Racial Justice and Equality. And so before we get started, we kind of wanted to tell you guys how the meeting is going to flow today. But I need to read this statement before we get started. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, state of emergency, and Governor Beshear's executive orders regarding social distancing, this meeting is being held via teleconference pursuant to Senate Bill 150 as signed by the governor on March 30th, 2020, and the Attorney General Opinion 20-05, and in accordance with KRS 61826. because it is not feasible to offer a primary physical location for the meeting. And so we have a very special guest today, but before I pitch it to Anthony to introduce Dr. Allison Davis today, just a couple of things that we want to mention before we get started. So as we move through the agenda today, we're going to try to give equitable time to both the economic opportunity component as well as the education component. And so I'm trying to stay as close to 1 hour for each as possible. But nearing the end of the meeting, Anthony and I will want to share some more information regarding the virtual town hall meeting that we learned about yesterday and talk more about the logistics of that. And so we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order and start with the approval of the minutes from July 17th. Does anyone have any corrections or that they would like to bring forward? I have a couple that Patrice emailed me about. Let's see, my computer just went wonky. So Sharita, under the education assignments for outcome number 1, it looks like Sister Patrice's name is misspelled. It has an A there instead of an E, so we'll need to correct that. And she saw that my name is not added there, so she'd like to have my name added under there too. Under the economic outlook outcomes, number 1 in the minutes, she had requested an additional outcome that mirrored the outcome of number 2 on the spreadsheet. We've already made that correction on our spreadsheet, but she would like that indicated in the minutes as well. Let's see. And she would also like to include, she made a second request for data, but we've already received that data. And so I would go ahead and include that she made a request for data, but we had already made that request on her behalf. But if we could have it indicated in the meeting, in the minutes. Let's see. And it looks like there's one other. She didn't want spending specific to Fayette County Public Schools in the education request for a report of all dollars spent toward education, such as shared use agreements, tutoring, and programs. She said she did not want that specific to Fayette County Public Schools, so we'll need to make that change as well. Does anyone else have any changes to the minutes that they would like reflected? Yes, Daryl.
Yes, in the statements where it say Daryl Thompson questioned, if you'll just change that to Daryl Thompson mentioned in each of those areas where it says questioned.
Oh, got it. We'll change that.
Thank you.
Are there any other corrections or deletions that should be noted? If not, we need a motion to approve the minutes from July 17, 2020 with the corrections that Daryl and Patrice have mentioned.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed with the same indication? So the motion carries. I'm now going to turn the meeting over to Anthony to lead the economic opportunity portion of our meeting.
Thank you, Sharon. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to see everyone on the line again today, and we're making progress. I think we are certainly highlighting what we think are the most important issues to deal with right now that we can. And I already know that there's lots of homework already going on. Congratulations to Kim and Sister Patrice for the work that they've already done. And just appreciate everybody's spirit and participation on this committee. I have the distinct pleasure to introduce you to, if you have not met her, Dr. Allison Davis. She's at the University of Kentucky. She's in the Department of Agricultural Economics, but is the Director of Community and Economic Development Initiative for Kentucky. I've seen Allison's work many times. She does a lot with economic developers around the state of Kentucky. And she has a unique way of getting down the data that most people don't get at. So I think it's important for her to be with us today. Clearly, we want to talk about the overall economy for Central Kentucky and look to see where African Americans can do better and where we position ourselves to certainly receive more of the financial pie and participate in the wealth building for Central Kentucky. But she also pulls data in from the United States and makes sure that we can have the appropriate comparisons to see how we're doing. And I think it's important for us to have that as part of this conversation, as these are going to be metrics that we hope to change in the future. So with that, Allison, she's going to share her screen. Let me just ask that if anyone has questions during the presentation, at the bottom, there's the reactions button. You can click on there and just wave your hand. Hopefully we'll see you. My understanding is that the hand will actually stay up there a while, so we ought to be able to get you. Or feel free to wait to the end because we'll certainly leave time for discussion following. Okay. Allison, we turn it over to you.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. I am going to start this. Do you see the big screen or the presenter screen?
The big screen.
Okay. Well, for those who don't know me, thanks for joining on this wonderful Friday afternoon. Anthony gave me a pretty tall task. And so what I am going to try to do today is just kind of touch on a bunch of different topics. And if there are questions or opportunities to go see if there's other data that I can help collect for you and that will help inform your discussions, I'm more than happy to do so. But it's kind of a lot of stuff, but some of it's deep and some of it is just sort of surface level, and we'll see where the interest may lie. So I tried to focus as much as I could on Lexington or the Lexington MSA. Not all data are available at a local level. And so I tried to find as much as I could locally, but if not, went nationally. And what's great about Lexington is that it is a very diverse economy. And so it represents a national economy relatively well. And so when I say things for the nation, it should fit relatively close to what's going on in the city. So I just wanted to start off with just an overview of the unemployment rate. We'll break this down a little bit more later. Over the last 10 years, we had the peak of the recession starting at the beginning of this last decade, had an unemployment rate of 8%, which is something that we would kind of all be yearning for right now. We started coming down in 2019 to a low rate of 3.4%. That was just below the state average. We are back up again. Last I saw, it was hovering around double digits, but we seem to be recovering faster some of the other places. So whenever I do a presentation about the Lexington economy, one of the things I'm most proud of is that we are in a very diverse economy. And places that have diverse economies are very resilient. When we have things in a community, a city like tobacco, like manufacturing, that may leave for either policy or just lack of competitiveness. If you don't have a diverse economy, then you suffer. And we see that across the eastern part of the state that relied so much on coal. The economy was not very diverse. When coal left, they had nothing backing behind it. And so we've had a lot of conversations about entities like Lexmark that have suffered and ebbed and flowed, and that being such an important employer for the city, and it is. But if something happened, we would still be okay. And that's, I think, something that's really important to know about the Lexington economy. There are only 3 places in the state where there's this yellow, which represents high diversity. And so you'll see it's Louisville, Lexington, and Bowling Green. And just to give you an idea of the industries that make up, and this is the larger MSA, so that would include all of our contiguous counties, and it's based on commuting patterns and what we call the workforce, the labor shed. So you'll see healthcare, we are well known for healthcare, and a lot of this discussion today will focus on the opportunities associated with healthcare. We have retail, we've got accommodations, food services, we've got some manufacturing. So to have so many pieces of a pie where there's not one piece that overwhelms any other, it's an amazing, amazing economy to look at. So I just get really excited when I get to present on this, because then when I go to other places and the pie does not look as good, it's just very depressing. So it's always just a joy. So this just provides a little bit more detail behind the numbers. So you get a sense of the actual total number of people employed. The LQ gives an idea of the relative concentration of that industry within the city. If you're over 1, that means you're relatively concentrated. If you're under 1, it means you're not. This is not a good or a bad thing. Back in the day, Detroit had a very high number around automobile manufacturing. So people would say, oh, we've got such a high number. But when that particular industry started to decline, then that meant they were really vulnerable. So to see these numbers and go, nothing's higher than a 2, that's a good sign. You don't want to have something that you're super, super specialized in, because it does make you vulnerable. You will see that we have some specialization in manufacturing, education, and then ag. And we will talk about that as well in a little bit. The wages column is something that we want to spend a little bit of time talking about. Wages are all over the place. Manufacturing tends to be the highest paid wage for the most part, besides some of our professional services like finance. And those jobs like retail, accommodations, entertainment, art tend to be lower paid, which is why the COVID crisis has created a really big problem, because those who were affected were those that were getting the lower wages. I also provided just a little bit of historical context about how these industries have fared over the last 5 years, and what the predicted growth or decline will be annually over the next 5 years. And again, we'll look at some of this, but there's nothing here that jumps out that's like, oh, this is, we can't believe this is happening, or this is good, or this is bad. This is just a diverse economy. And it just also gives you a sense of future labor demand and then occupations. One of the figures I typically provide is this bubble chart. And the bubble chart is broken down by different type of clusters. And we use clusters because when an area has a cluster, it tends to be able to attract additional industry that fits in that cluster, or it's able to spur new innovations, new entrepreneurial opportunities to support that cluster. So when you have a cluster, the entire supply chain, not entire, but a lot of the supply chain will locate closer for transaction, to minimize transactions costs. And so, our biggest known cluster is going to be Toyota. And this is for Fayette County, so it's not in here. If we expanded the bubble chart to the entire MSA level, then you would see a very big circle that would represent Toyota. If we looked at the state, we'd see, important industries like UPS and other automobile manufacturing. But just looking at Fayette County, each individual bubble represents a cluster. And the size of the bubble represents the size of employment. And if you look along the axis from right to left, if you're to the right, that's going to be an industry that is expected to expand in the next 10 years. If you're to the left, it's expected to decline. If I'm looking up and down, that's showing me the wage rate. So ideally, if I were to focus my attention, I can't, this is one thing about Zoom is I can't use my fingers a lot. I would be focusing in the upper right-hand quadrant. Right, these are jobs that are growing and these are good jobs. These are good paying jobs. If I'm looking at the lower left-hand corner, those are jobs that are declining and they don't pay well. So when I talk to my EDs, I will typically say, you need to convince me that this is an industry worth investing in. And if it's not, then we just let it go. And if it is, then, you know, we have to sort of justify it and figure out what we need to do. But we tend to really say that those in the upper right-hand corner are emerging or are star industries. So you'll see if we look up there, we've got health, construction, professional services, ag, education, finance. And on the bottom, you see consumer services. Those are more of the tourism and front-facing types of industries, the restaurants, accommodations, retail, some of the retail that might fall under there will fall there. So those are the ones that we expect to have some growth. All right, I'm looking, I can't see all the, Anthony, I'm trusting you to sort of keep an eye on if anyone has any questions. Okay, so then one of the things that I've done a lot of work with in Lexington is around what makes Lexington unique and the opportunities that exist because of our niche in agriculture. And, you know, Lexington is known for being home to this rural landscape, but offering urban amenities. And so there's obviously a lot of discussion around the pressures between different land uses within the city. And so we do this on a fairly regular basis, try to capture the importance of agriculture in the Bluegrass. And when we talk about ag in Lexington, we are talking about a really big cluster that encompasses a lot of industries that we wouldn't necessarily be considering when we think about agriculturally traditionally. So this little circle chart shows that ag production, which is on farm, is you know, sort of the driving part of ag, but there are so many supporting industries and so many industries that buy directly from ag that make this a really, really critical cluster for the city and for the region. And it's something that used to be important, you know, historically and traditionally for Black families years ago, but not as much anymore. And so what I tried to do was talk about some of the jobs associated with this cluster. And you can see these industries include, you know, fencing, farm equipment, different types of food processing and manufacturing, but it also includes, you know, the world-renowned veterinary clinics. It includes all the banking and real estate associated with Kentucky Bluegrass Farms. It includes the Kentucky Horse Park with all of the national headquarters that are represented there, the stockyards, lots of different retail opportunities, certainly the recreation and tourism. We've got some amazing communications through Blood Horse. And then of course, we've got all kinds of educational opportunities, particularly the one that I represent, which is the College of Ag, and Locust Trace up, you know, in the northern part of the city. So not many cities in this country have this. And so to figure out how to capitalize on this asset is really an opportunity. So when we did this research, we found that 1 out of every 12 jobs was directly or indirectly associated with agriculture. So that's not small. So something to keep in mind as we're thinking about kind of opportunities for the future. The other thing
Allison,
I did,
Allison,
yes.
There was a question on that last slide, and I think you were just about to get to it. Daryl wanted to know if this is an opportunity to intentionally focus on career and transition readiness pathways for students P to 16.
What was the last part you said?
The pathways for students through 16.
Oh, yeah.
16. Yeah.
There are so many opportunities. And I think, Locust Trace is a high school, but that doesn't exist in a lot of places. And that is a resource that I think could be really, really important, and is important. But there are, this is a specialized area that, we just don't find other places. So I think that is definitely an opportunity.
And we'll actually be finding out, hearing more about a Black farmers market. My wife has been participating with some other folks in getting black soil and others.
Yes,
so that's going to be coming up soon. Daryl had another question on the previous slide, and it relates to the aerospace products that make up approximately 14.6 billion in exports. Are we missing out on this industry? Should this be reflected and added to our economic development portfolio?
So, if we expanded the Lexington economy and we made it more MSA, and I can certainly provide that graphic for you, the aerospace piece will fall under auto and auto related. And I think as soon as we start bringing in the region, that number will explode. But that is certainly an area of emphasis for the state. Thinking about Moorhead State as being absolutely a critical part of that. Yeah, so that will definitely be something I would focus on.
Good, thank you.
And yeah, I need these questions are great. So one of the things I did, and I don't know, this is a little bit valuable, but this is kind of struck a chord with me when I was talking to Anthony last week, is when he said, we don't need all Black people working in a restaurant. Like we can have professional opportunities. And so I focus a lot on this, what are the opportunities in different occupations, and did a little bit of sort of this gap analysis for what types of occupations are needed in the next 10 years. And these are very kind of high level descriptions. It gets down to a much more specific. The red side is the gap. The blue side is that we will have too many. And so the red is saying we're looking for health, we're looking for management, we're looking for financial. These are great paying jobs. If you look down there, those are all really nice, incomes based on wages. When you look below, where we have sort of this excess supply of different types of occupations, these are the jobs that don't pay as much. And so to me, I look at that and I say, well, this is sort of a no-brainer that we need to focus on, these higher, how can we get folks into these higher paying wages and jobs? Okay. Excuse me. So I wanted to focus a little bit on some data that reflects racial differences, and kind of just call out what's going on and what we see. And this is, it's a lot of information. I'm trying to, and it may take a little longer to sort of digest than right now. But what I tried to do was pull out the population of working age, and we do consider working age to be 16, which you can argue, and you can look at data for individuals that are 25 and over, if you're trying to get a better sense of, kind of real working age populations. But BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, calls it at 16. And then we look at the number of people who are in the labor force. And the labor force is defined as someone who is either employed or is actively looking for work. And so it's employed plus officially unemployed. It doesn't include discouraged workers. So it's someone who's actively in the labor force. Of that number, I know the total employment, and I know this number, employment to population ratio. Some people use labor force participation. It's got, some folks have some issues with that. Employment to population kind of normalizes some of the discussion. But here's where we start to see some, I can't highlight anything on this thing, where we see some differences between white and non-white. So 72% of employment, 71% of the population of male population is employed versus 53%. And then 64% of females versus 43%. So this is something that we have to recognize, and there are all kinds of reasons for this, but this is something that comes up in conversation a lot. And so why is it that 4 out of every 10 non-white women are not working versus 6.4 of white women are? So just something to consider. The unemployment rate, when we looked at, I said Lexington unemployment was about 3.4%. And these numbers are a little bit old. They don't get collected regularly. They do a full study. Workforce Cabinet did a big study. So these are older numbers, but the overall unemployment rate for white was 3.2%. It didn't vary much by gender. And then non-white was just a little bit higher and a little bit more of a difference between males and females.
Allison,
Yes.
Daryl Thompson had a question too. Go ahead, Daryl.
Well, as you were putting up the juxtaposing supply now versus later, teaching is nowhere in the data metrics, and it's probably one of our most, I couldn't see it, maybe it's too small, but my question was, where is teaching? And if it is there, what are the expectations when it comes to supply
Yes.
over the next years?
So teaching falls under, and I don't know if you can see my pointer when I'm touching it, but it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th one down. That's not going to reflect any kind of structural shift that's occurring right now, where we anticipate, potentially a big outmigration of teachers because of all kinds of policy and COVID and so forth. So my guess is that number is anticipated to increase. And again, we could go down and further look at kind of more detailed occupation, but at that kind of high level, they call it educational and library occupations. But I think you're right. That's certainly going to be a shortage. Thank you for the thumbs up, Daryl. Okay. So the other thing I want to do, now this is a US map. I was not able to find great data quickly for this. I used instead some census data. I went to get something. So at the US level, the green line represents median earnings for the white population, and it is tracking up. The blue line represents the median week earnings for the Black population, also tracking up. But what I did was look at the trend in the difference between the two over time. And we've started to make a little bit, or the difference has continued to, it was increasing. And it's around right now $200 per week. When I looked at Lexington, and this is for the entire MSA, in 2018, up in the right left-hand column or left-hand box, that's a pretty startling difference in median household income between white and Black. When I broke it down by weekly, it looks pretty similar to the US rates. But that's a $24,000 difference. So that was something I wanted to highlight. I know
Allison, how does this compare for Latinx households as well?
I don't know. I can look up. Because this one was, some of the data I had include Latinx, but these don't. So I will look that up and send that to you.
Okay, thanks.
My understanding, if I look back, it was actually, I have some information coming up. I think that may address it, but not that one. I'll find that out for you. Okay, I'm going the wrong way. So I know you're going to be talking about this, but to me, it's critical part. We can't ignore the education side. So I'm not going to touch a lot on it, but I'm going to make a recommendation for something that you all should further explore, which is kind of based on this. And, so you have to look at education. My colleagues who work in for CBER for UK, it's the Center for Business and Economic Research, they will claim night and day that the difference in earnings and the parts of Kentucky that do well because they have high rates of individuals who are getting a bachelor's degree or higher. They will stake that claim every day. And so it's what's an interesting conversation that's about to happen, because I was looking at this and these are very, very different numbers. Not as much with high school graduation, although it's just about a 9%. So I mean, 16% of, and this is for individuals who are 25 or higher. So it's, gets everyone. So by the time you're 25, do you have a high school graduation, a graduate degree, or do you have a bachelor's degree? And so 84% have a high school or high school graduates, and 20% have a bachelor's degree or higher. And Lexington has a pretty high rate, but the white population is double. So what I thought was really interesting, and Anthony sent me on this wild goose chase this morning without even knowing, but it sent me an article and I started digging into the background of some of the information they were saying. And, we keep talking, particularly now, because of the expense associated with going to college, what is your ROI? And one of the pieces of information that Anthony said was an article that was really quite compelling. And which is why I'm going to ask you all to think about something else. So if you think about your reference group as being the white population, what this is showing is the differences in 4-year college degree attainment rates. So not surprising, the Asian population tends to have higher rates of educational attainment, and then Latinx and Black will have lower rates. And here we'll see that the Latinx population tends to have even less 4-year college degree than the Black population. I saw a hand go up. Is that Daryl? Was it Daryl?
I think he does have a question, yes.
Okay, I see it flashing. I just can't see who's asking it.
It wasn't me though that time.
Shucks. Okay. Okay, I'll leave you to it. And let me see, I think there's one more coming, yeah. Then what was interesting, again, the reference group is the white group. We're looking at adjusted family income, and this is older, by the highest educational level, where if you were at 100, that means that you would have the same amount of income as the base level, which is the white population. So you'll see, if we look at someone who has high school, there is that the African American population actually has a little bit more family income than Asian. As you go along this higher levels of education, it's a little bit interesting, particularly when you look at postgraduate degree. And we're going to get into that in a second. But when a postgraduate degree, so if I read this right now, it shows that the return to a postgraduate degree for the Black population is not paying off well. So then if I go here, I just find this just startling, that this just shows the income gap is actually widening with educational attainment levels.
So Miss Dr. Davis, can I jump? So as you all are disaggregating this data, if you layer racism on the top of this, which is part of why we're here today, particularly 400 years of racism, this data for some would appear that the starting line was the same for everybody across these groups. We have to ensure that the narrative that's been painted as to the compelling why these lags are there, these disparities are there, are based on institutional and systemic racism that began over 400 years ago and continue today. And part of that continuation is impacted by education now being a business, versus as a privilege and a right to access. And so if you can't afford it, particularly at the post-secondary area, you continue to get this large disparity. So I wanted to make sure that that was a part of our conversation.
And I think, you know, the article that Anthony sent, and I think this highlights exactly that, Daryl, that if we just say, oh, you know, Black people just need to go to college, right? That's what, you know, they're just, you know, the ability to afford it is a question. And B, even if you are able to afford it, there's still something, right? And we're gonna, most of us will call it systemic racism. Well, hopefully we'll recognize that. But there's something else that is limiting. It's not just, oh, I just need to go to college and I'll make as much as everybody else. So I thought that these graphics were really good at telling that story. And I know Anthony's got, there were the 10 myths, I think, is that what it was called? The 10 myths about why there's a wealth gap. And I thought this one was particularly compelling because that's been the argument. You know, if we look at this previous table, and we say, well, look, here we go. You know, this is clearly the problem. We just need to, you know, find a way for Black individuals to be able to access higher education, right? And that'll solve everything. But they have to be, you know, educated enough to be able to get accepted into school. So they can tell this whole narrative when you still, even after you get through all that, we still have a significant issue at hand. And so right. I'm hoping that this graphic will really help.
Yeah.
And I think, and I know, again, I'm not the education expert, but this to me was a really useful kind of another step backwards about if you were, it's looking at your scores in 10th grade around math. And basically what it was first looking at was your socioeconomic status and how much that affected your ability. If you were not high attaining, it affected your ability to turn into high attaining. Those who had high socioeconomic status, but were not particularly successful at their testing, they were able to then transition because they were high socioeconomic status. Those that are low were not able to make that transition. And so they looked at that here by race, and you can see if you were you know, a Black African-American with above math score, then you had more likelihood to go on to school. If you were below, you had a really low likelihood of going on. So again, it's kind of bringing it back to sort of the you know, the community factors, the school factors, the racist factors, and so forth. Okay. So here's where I thought, and I know you guys don't have a lot of time, and this is such an important topic for you all. But in order to truly understand what is going on and why some areas may be doing well and why some areas may not be doing well, we have the opportunity to access some incredibly rich information that I know has been used, but I don't know if it's been used for this purpose. But Kentucky is one of, I think, 3 or 4 states now, it may have increased the number of folks that are participating, that track a child from pre-K all the way through career. If that individual stays within Kentucky or like moves to like 1 or 3 other states. Like if you move to Washington State, we track you. I think Ohio, we track you, maybe Indiana. And so you can get all kinds of information at the student level to track, you know, contextual factors. You can track exposure to training. You can look at the school system and you can see where that person, you know, how that person progresses. And through that, you can kind of identify where some of the obstacles may be occurring if you have a large enough population. They've been KY Stats, which used to be called KSUS, has just this amazingly rich data set. And it's not about, I mean, I love research, but this is about like truly understanding like what, you know, if we take, able to find, you know, 50 successful Black individuals who came from an area that had low socioeconomic scores, or, you know, what happened along the way to see how we were able to get that person to, you know, to perform exceed expectations. So those data are, for the most part, free. You have to do sort of this research proposal, but that would give a lot of really good information. They've used this a lot. It's just data that you just can't get many places. And I find it truly very valuable. So that was one of my suggestions, because you can get the education and then you can get the career aspect. All right, one of the things I wanted to share was some occupation trends. And I thought what I did, I think I did this, yep, and this is national, right? It's not by, I don't have it at the state or local level. And so what it does is it says across the United States, there are 157 million people over the age of 16 who are working. 12.3% are Black, 77.7% are white, 6.5% are Asian, and 17.6% are Hispanic or Latino. And so what I was curious about, and particularly based on Anthony's conversation last week, was what occupations have the highest share of Black individuals? And then I'm going to look at the lowest. And if you look here, you'll see postal service sorters, home health nursing aides, correctional officers, barbers, bill and account collectors, healthcare support occupations, baggage porters. So these are the occupations that have at least one of every 5 people in this occupation is Black. When I go to the next slide, I want to know where are the smallest share. And there's not a lot of statistical assistance in the United States, but there are at least 0 or a very, very small share. I didn't go out to the second decimal place. Supervisors in ag, tour and travel guides, vet assistants, drywall installers, you know, so I thought this was an interesting graphic to look at. There's nothing here about wages, if these are the types of jobs that are preferred. But just to kind of show you where there is just a very, that's interesting, statistical assistance, that's the largest share of Asian, I think falls under that. But just to have a sense of when he says, you know, oh, when Anthony says, you know, we don't want to be, you know, just be doing, you know, being correctional officers and barbers, you know, we have opportunities and we have the capability to do more. So then what I wanted to do, again, this is Kentucky. Okay, so Kentucky data, a couple years old. What they did, and this is through the Education Workforce Cabinet, is they tried to predict the demand for occupations based on the educational requirements. All right, so this particular slide focuses on bachelor's degree and associates, and the next one will be lower levels of educational attainment. It is ranked by the growth rate. So to me, this is a great opportunity to say, these are the types of jobs that we should be searching for, that we should be going after. We've got software development, and it gives an idea also of the wages associated with it. So is this a desirable job, or is this more of a entry level or a job along the career pathway? So, I mean, those are pretty significant average wages for the most part. Software developers, research analysts, substance use counselors, appraisers, athletic trainers. Then as you go down to associate's degree, certainly the wages will fall a little bit, but there are some, you know, occupational therapy, physical therapy, a lot of those health occupations that we know are going to be in really high demand. When I go back to high school, post-secondary, non-degree, so these are more of our certificate programs or high school diploma or equivalent. Again, those wages will drop a little bit, but still some attractive positions within more of these certificate programs, a lot within medical assistants, phlebotomists, dental assistants, and a lot of these have currently very low share of Black workers in them. And air mechanics and service technicians, look at that. Projected employment is 200 people almost that we would be able to employ. So I thought this may be useful for you all to look at because it gives you a sense of all the different opportunities along the educational spectrum. College is not for everyone, but there's still some great opportunities that are out there. So I think that was,
Allison,
yeah.
I think Sister Patrice has an interesting question.
Okay.
Patrice?
Oh, okay. I'm reading her question. Is there any statistical way to quantify whether a low percentage of Blacks in any field is due to industry racism? Mark?
Yeah, I don't know if there is. I mean, that was the case. It's the key question.
You know, it would be kind of interesting. You know, if you had, yeah, you know, to some extent, maybe, because if you were able to access those Kentucky education data by the student, and you were able to control for that you assume the student is the same because they came from the same neighborhood, you know, same general community, they had access to the same types of opportunities, and then you see them, you know, go into similar careers. That would be one way you could do it. It wouldn't be perfect, and we have large enough numbers that if you focus maybe on a few industries, I bet you could do something.
I think Patrice had a question when we were looking at the agricultural information. If you could speak to farm to table programs and if any cities have a better model of connecting consumers to local farmers, particularly Black farmers.
You know, that has been, you know, I work closely with Ashton, and that's a big one-man show with a big ask for a big city. Partners like Black Soil, and I know she'll be on, Ashley will be on today. Yeah. I mean, that they have become in such high demand in terms of, we just recently did a Black Farmer Fund. And right now that network just doesn't exist to the point where someone like myself who wants to figure out how to support can do that. Lexington, you know, you have to have someone like a Black Soil who can help organize. I haven't seen anything besides that has been successful yet. I've seen some great farm to table programs, but we were somewhat shocked, although it should have been eye-opening for us when we had this Black Farmer Fund, and we were having a really hard time finding applicants because we just naturally assume that, oh, people will just see, you know, our application and be like, oh yeah, I'll apply to this, and it just didn't work. Like, we didn't have the networks in place to reach out to those that have farms. So I think that's a really good question and something that needs to be addressed. And we actually talked about that with Community Farm Alliance, saying, you know, what do we do? You know, this was difficult and we haven't been able to expend all of our money. And I know that there are Black farmers who would benefit.
Sure. I mean, certainly we're in an area that's surrounded by farmland, and they're making generational decisions right now as to whether or not this next generation, our current generation, is willing to continue in the farming. So what happens to that land? We have individuals who may want to take that over and become farmers. It's a better opportunity for us.
So Anthony, I will add part of that again goes back to the history and the struggle for those Black farmers today is not as much accessing, but it is utilizing the property that they own and being able to legally declare their ownership to it. And that's a result of lost deeds, a lot of issues in the PVA and the court system that basically have allowed adverse possession to be the person that owns the land. And because we moved away from the land and somebody else started using it. And I've got several family members that are tied up in court over several hundred acres of land across Kentucky and can't use it because they have been institutionally again and systematically kept out as a result of not being able to present the legal documents. All right. Now that's it's twofold. The responsibility of us as a people maintaining and handling our business,
Right.
but also the fact that you struggle against trying to win against Big Brother when you really are fighting a system. And so those individuals struggle and get frustrated, and they get taxed out of the opportunity to legally represent themselves because they don't have the money to defend their property rights.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. Were there any other questions?
Well, I was going to say there's been a really big push across the South with most of the HBCUs to provide as much support as they can with air property issues. It has been just the center of conversation across all of the Deep South for the last 3 years. So that is certainly a significant issue. And I had a colleague of mine who wanted me to go across the state and ask for PVA data, because I work closely with all of our, our county officials, so that we could identify, the property owners, and it is impossible.
Yeah,
Have records, and so it is a daunting situation. And so, Daryl, you're 100% correct. Okay, I want to end with, perhaps most of you know, we're in a pandemic. It's been super fun. I've enjoyed it. Just to look at unemployment and what has happened. This is not super recent. These are the most recent data that we have that look by race. And so looking at the Bluegrass workforce area, we had about 87,000 claims up through April, of which 14% were minority. One of the things that I was really big on, and I think the data were out for about 10 seconds, and I quickly grabbed it, was looking at the Paycheck Protection Program. As working across the state with a lot of businesses, I knew those that didn't have a lot of capacity were having a really challenging time being able to figure this system out. And it certainly wasn't made a whole lot easier by SBA, because they really tried to add as many crazy things at once. And so I was really interested. I did some analysis that I published that looked at it by gender and by race. And one of the factors is that you don't have to answer the question. So it's a little bit tricky to really fully understand what's going on. But what was interesting is that where we were able to capture, it's still a pretty startling difference, which again, I think very much highlights, systemic racism. And so if you look at loans under $150,000, the actual loan amount. And, there are 3,900 loans that we don't know anything about. 323 that are white, they average about $43,000. Black or African-American, there were 10 loans, and we're at $37,000 or $36,000. When we looked at the big loans, where we're not told the total amount, we're just told the range. And this is in Lexington, there was one loan for over $150,000, 68 for white. And then you can see the one for the one black loan was for the smallest amount. So I just thought
this is very, very important data. This is the number. This is the revenue. This is the program that was meant to keep people employed during this COVID crisis, and we see the disparity. I mean, it's shocking.
It is,
and it isn't, and at the same time, it isn't.
Yeah, and the one thing that disappointed me, and I understand perfectly, but this unanswered section, I find that to be kind of cheap out, and it just bothers me because I think that would have highlighted even more disparities. So one thing I thought I was really interested in because of my conversations with folks was if they didn't have an existing relationship with a banker or a technical assistance provider, it was just like, it was an impossible task. And so what I did was pulled out the lenders, those that lent to everybody and those that lent to African-American population. I don't know if this tells a story, but I just think it's really important. And whether it is purposeful, which I hope not, or whether it's just by nature of relationships and classes and what have you, that there are a lot of banks that didn't lend to a single Black person. And that to me is just sort of why. And should we have conversations with those bankers and say, what was the problem? You know, were people not eligible? People not coming in here? I mean, to me, that's just astonishing that Fifth Third Bank didn't have a single loan, that JP Morgan Chase didn't have a single loan. And Cumberland Valley, which had the most, I mean, it's not large numbers, which again, I wish we had more information, that Cumberland Valley isn't in the top lenders for the other column. So again, this is me just sort of hypothesizing and creating probably more trouble than I should, but I just know so much from when, you know, I work a lot in rural, and that's a big issue, is that if you don't have, you know, those relationships, you will not be able to access capital. And so I just wonder here, you know, what the story is, and I just, you know, it's hard to make a final claim because you just don't know what those unanswered were. And maybe 3,900 people were in fact Black that got that money. I don't know. And the number is relatively low. It's $36,000. So I just have no idea. But to me, how is the federal government going to be able to evaluate this program as being able to support those that need it most if we don't know who those people are? But that's just my platform. Okay, I think I'm going to stop there.
I have a question. Allison,
yeah, sure.
Do we know how many applications were submitted that weren't approved by Black companies?
I can check. You know, my understanding, Sharon, is that if you were able to make it through the process and you got your application submitted, you were likely going to be approved. It was how many people didn't make it through the process.
The initial process.
Yeah, and so I mean, I can check to see what additional data there are. But when we've been working all across the really, really rural areas where I know that, you know, there's not a lot of collateral. And basically someone would say, if I made it through, I got it. And I've been following this Facebook group called Small Business of Kentucky and watching a lot of people come in and say, once I made it through, I was golden. Now, I don't know if that may just be purely coincidental. So I'll check it out for you and see what I can find.
I have a little comment to that.
Go ahead,
Allison, if you go back to the screen showing the banks. So one of the comments in a group of us that was able to get some of the PPP money, and you look at the bank, a bank typically, you just can't pop in on a bank and get a loan. So this is data that's actually showing the lack of Black and brown that's actually prior to PPP loans that's able to get a loan through these banks or is reaching out to the community. So it's not just based off of PPP, it's actually showing another story is that they do not have relationships with African-American or Hispanic or other ethnic groups or racial groups as far as on the loan capacity. So that's why you're not seeing the numbers. It's just you can't pop up one day and get a loan from a bank you didn't get a loan from before.
Yep, no, he's right. And that's right. You know, we look at the outcomes that we want from this. One of the things that we're talking about is access to funding, different funding sources. not only for the ability to scale up your business, to expand your business, to be able, but this was about survival through this pandemic, and still did not get any help. So you know that access to capital has to be an outcome. We've got to develop better systems and programs to get capital for companies to expand and grow. And then not even talking about getting the kinds of training that you might want to do to take your business to the next level. Where does that money come from? So these are things that we're talking about as far as recommendations coming out of this. And I think it's absolutely critical that we have it. Were there any other questions? I guess I'm over an hour, Sharon. I did it again.
Oh my God,
were there any other questions?
Oh, no, this is fine.
Anthony, I have a question.
Sure.
Dr. Davis, this is Reginald Thomas. And I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked our guest speaker last week. I read the article that Anthony sent last night, and I so appreciate the wealth of information you provided us today. And it's very enlightening. As a committee, and a big committee this is in terms of the tasks we have before us, we've got to come up with some changes, with some recommendations that are going to turn these racist barriers around, break them down, and really move this country forward to really a more perfect union, a more equitable society. So what I want to know from you are what two recommendations will you make to us, or can you make to us, to reverse the institutional barriers of racism that exist here in Lexington?
So for me, the economic situation is a symptom, right? It is a symptom of everything that has happened prior to an individual finding a job. And so the two things I would say is pre-K. That's where they say it's, and sometimes it's before pre-K, but there's got to be some policy that is targeted at providing a nurturing, engaging, loving opportunity, so that individuals can all start at the same place. The second is that there are some real opportunities with some tailored mentoring type of training for individuals to be able to achieve high wage opportunities. I've remarked at Locust Trace High School. It's just sort of a niche opportunity that says ag is our focus, and we're going to find the students within, Fayette County that think that ag has a future, and we're going to groom them for lots of different occupations. And we're not grooming them so that they make, $9 an hour. We're grooming them so they have a career and they have a career pathway. One of the things I saw, which I just find shocking or not, is that there were so few Black veterinarians. I don't understand, So why don't we look at that and say, how do we get a Black population? How do we get them into the healthcare field? It's a clear opportunity for the city, great wage, fulfilling. So there, I just think having mentoring in that kind of high school, early high school, and getting some focus around what are some career opportunities, and stop just somehow saying that we can do better, we can do more. So those are the two. Very few kind of on. Oh, and then the third one is, what the hell with the banks, right? That's got to stop. There's got to be, and they all have the CRA requirements. And it's interesting because the only person who I've ever seen address the Black population through the CRA group is through the bank that's in Walmart. It's like Evergreen or something. But I mean, they have a requirement to their community through the Community Reinvestment Act to support the needs of their community. That doesn't look like. So that would be the symptom one, I guess. But the rest of it, I think, is before they get out of high school.
Yeah, that's good. So what you showed today, it puts information out there by the way, we'd love to be able to put this presentation in our Google Docs Drive because this now needs to become a public document. But it talks about several things that we've talked about on our recommendations. It shows why we want to encourage MBE development in tech companies, equine and farming, ag tech, and healthcare. Money's there, opportunities there, growth is there. We need to get the people there. And we've also talked about the role for apprenticeship programs. You saw those occupations and all of that work that you would think, you know, carpentry work and the like. There's very few people doing it, at least in the data that you showed. And so again, it justifies. So what we're doing is identifying here in our report the things that need to be developed for Lexington for us to be better off as a community. And I say as a community and not just an African-American or a people of color community, because we're the growth demographic. And if you're going to be the growth demographic and you can't grow in areas that are going to bring wealth, then guess what happens to the overall community, right? So I don't need to preach. I'm sorry. Did anybody have any questions?
Add, is that, and Bishop, you're on mute, so I beat you. So the one thing I'll add that I thought today was important was the announcement about the relationship with the HBCUs,
I sent that to the committee. I think it's awesome.
It
Yes.
is. So we need to dial into that through KSU. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Go ahead,
sorry.
Bishop.
So kind of piggybacking on what you're saying, if I understand the reason this group was developed and the other subcommittees is basically to come before the city and say, this is what we want to see different. Right. Allison, I appreciate all the data that you put together. We've been getting other emails with data. So that data has been there for years and years and years and years, right? You have to care. If you're gonna do something and you're gonna make a change, you have to want to do it. The data's been there, you know, and if we present it and say, okay, Mayor, this is what we demand, tell everybody, increase the diversity amongst their employment population. I'm not saying go out and hire just because, but you should have to meet some type of level. You get some tax credit, whatever. You have to care. You have to want to do it. You know, I've been a part of different joint ventures in other states to where, you know, it's 10%, 15% or whatever. I get calls from a contractor in St. Louis, a steel company all the time, trying to figure out how we can work together because they want to work with me. They want to give it an opportunity and whatnot.
That's right.
And so it's just basically you have to put something in place to incentivize it, because other than that, a lot of the community would already be doing it because they care. So a lot of times the only way you get people to care, you start talking about money or what are they going to get out of it. So, and that's why I really want us to focus on is like you have to demand the job. You know, you have to demand some increase in the existing salaries. I've been a part of young professional programs here. The Black and Brown, I think I might have mentioned this before, they hit a ceiling and they leave. When they're young and they have the opportunity, they leave Lexington and they go somewhere where they can get through the ceiling. Or they go somewhere where they know if they're going to break through, they're not going to get stuck at a higher payer position. They're able to continue to grow. So they leave the area. One of the things I want to bring up, it has to deal with education and programs, which I'm nervous about because I'm a part of it. I'm born and raised here in Lexington, and I've seen it. There was a lot of community programs here in Lexington through the 80s, early 90s, and you notice, and even it happened now, what happens is the city, it's time for a budget cut, they don't have the money, guess what happens? That program's gone. So I feel like today, from educational, as part of this group, if we go and say, go and put $10,000 in this neighborhood, and that neighborhood, give a summer program and do this, and they do it, next year or 2 years from now, when there's time for a budget cut, it's gone, right? And so what do we do here? We go back and we have this meeting again. So I think it kind of goes back to the generation. Well, put the money in the economy, put the money in the parents' pockets. I'm not saying don't consider programs, but just make sure there's a balance, because 6 months down the road or a year from now, that program can get pulled based off a budget cut. You know,
right.
if you increase the culture, increase the diversity amongst in employment or whatnot, and salary increase, you know, it kind of takes care of itself from there. And it's going to be really hard for somebody to go back and say, we're going to deduct your salary because you're black or brown, because we don't have the funding. So I think that's really what we need to target, is just say, the data's been there. You can't shoot holes in the data, right? You can't do it. You just have to want to do it. You have to care. We have to come up with a way to make the other businesses, that's the private businesses, to get on board.
Yeah.
Public businesses, they have some requirements and they need to do better.
Doing something,
but you got to get the private involved.
Well, and that's why we've got on here too, Bishop, and I'm thinking about the best way to do this. But as a committee, we all come up with the right answer on this, but there needs to be an incentive with the tax code to reward those individual companies who actually move forward doing businesses with MBEs. And we talk about a 1% reduction in occupational tax all the time for recruiting companies here. Why wouldn't we look at something like that for rewarding those companies that have consistently worked with MBEs? Now you get that break as long as you're working with them. You stop, then it goes away. Something, we've got to come up with something. And then the other thing I want to just say really quickly.
Anthony, real quick, I just want to interrupt you. I'm sorry to do it. It's not just, and I'm not just speaking of MBE businesses. I'm speaking the people that are employed with these people. You know, their salary, if you look at the salary difference, it's substantial.
There is. There's a wages difference.
Look at the percentage that's even just getting a job. It's substantial. It's sad to say, I made a little note, looked at the statistic of your tradesmen, your craft force, and the percentage of the whites, and how blacks is like a 2 or 3%. I looked at a carpenter, was the concrete mason, which has shocked me. It was 1.3%, and then the Hispanic it went up. Well, this goes back to what Durrell was saying. Don't forget the history and the systematic racism, where it was embedded to where our grandparents or our parents or our great-grandparents worked their behind off doing that. We used to be the majority. And they always said, well, I don't want you to have to do or go through what I do. I don't want you to have to put in 80 hours a week breaking my back. You know, that's why I'm working overtime, so you can go to college, so you can do something and do better. It's no different than moving out the neighborhood. So now you see where the craft force, which used to be black 30 years ago, now it's Hispanic or it's majority white. You know, and eventually, and I see it because I deal with the trades I am, and it's eventually starting to make that turn again. It's on that same path again, rotation. It's because people feel like we got the mentality is just to go school, learn books. And if you really look at it, it's making you fall out of the workforce environment, you know, or you move to a different city where you're able to prosper. In different cities, they end up taking a hit. So sorry about that, but I just want you to make sure it's not just black businesses, it's the people that's actually working in corporate America also need to be given the opportunity.
Oh, I agree with that. I'm just talking about what the city can influence with tax code. That's what I'm talking about. But I'm not disagreeing with your point. I'm just trying to find other vehicles to reward that conscious decision and help them make that behavior modification. The other thing I wanted to say is next week we will have a guest with us to talk about really the intersection between these two areas, and that's workforce development. What are we doing in terms of training individuals for where the opportunity is going to be and where it is now? So that conversation will come up too next week. We'll talk more about it. Did anyone else have any other questions of Allison before we move on to education?
I do just want to, I do want to make sure that we don't lose the conversation about ag and land ownership.
Absolutely. Yep.
The importance of Lexington and their current mechanisms for ensuring land stays in agriculture, whether it's a PDR program or something else. I don't want to lose that because it's such an important part of the future of the city.
Excellent.
Well, agriculture too, I just want to point out agriculture. You brought up Kentucky State University has one of the biggest agriculture programs there is in the state, if not the biggest, as far as relative to the size of the school.
Mm-hmm.
And majority of the students are white. And it's not being shared. I knew of it just because of my history and my family generation of graduating from Kentucky State University, but it's not exposed to the kids. And a lot of times too is making sure how you expose them to kids. It's not just farming.
No,
it's not farming.
No,
it's not
not
research.
at all.
It's
That's right.
engineering. And I've mentioned it to the kids. And as soon as you say agriculture, the immediate first thing that comes to their mind is farming or being on a tractor. And you have to change the culture of when people, like I was saying when I first got on, is trigger words. What first comes to mind? You have to change that. And so kids will understand, or individuals will understand what is really involved with that. And it may be an opportunity for a career change.
Anthony, if I could jump in real quick, because he just mentioned trigger words, and Allison, this is for you as well. You mentioned the PDR, and Bishop mentioned expose, all right? And so I'm going to play on the word expose and PDR, because when we're talking about racism and systematic systems that protect the interest of a certain group of people, you couldn't get a better conversation started around PDR and expose. We're talking about growth and development in a localized system that protects 70% of its land from being developed, that's owned by 2% probably of the wealth. That what better conversation are we gonna, if we want to truly be authentic about this conversation, we've got to look at those policies that are continuing to hold people back from access and opportunity while protecting a certain group in a city that's growing. How can you grow in a city that protects 70% of its land from being developed? So let's talk about exposure around this systematic approach.
I would say that Marcus would probably be a really good person to ask about this, because he's talking to these young people on a daily basis and in real time, being able to tell you exactly what they're thinking. And I would be interested to hear what you have to say about that, Marcus.
Yeah, that's it's interesting to try to catch the vibe of our young people, and quite honestly, a lot of them that I work with, they're just they have not so much pipe dreams. They have dreams about what they want to do, but they don't have a lot of good mentorship in specific areas. There's very few of our young people that know what they want to do and have a plan to do that. And so one of our biggest hurdles is trying to set out what that plan looks like for our young people. And specific to agriculture, I've maybe one out of 45 high school students that I saw over the course of the last 6 months has mentioned anything about agriculture. And that's because that's been a part of what they've done in their family. But beyond that, it's the same kind of thing as what Bishop Carter said is a lot of those families have said, we don't want you to have to go through what we went through. And so they are looking in different fields to try to better themselves and better their families.
And Marcus, I would just like to add to what you're saying. One of the things that you mentioned, kids don't know what they want to do. It's hard to have a dream about something if you don't know that that something exists. And so that's right. You can't dream about something if you don't know it's available, or you don't believe that it is available for you. And in regards to agriculture and the kids, I know that Ron Mack has this Legacy Equine Academy where he is, and you're shaking your head in agreement, but where he is bringing in minority students to teach them more about agriculture, equine, and make sure that they have that close link to locust trace. And during that process, one of the things that the kids are finding out is it doesn't mean that you're just going to be in the field farming. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that you'll just have horses. You may want to be a writer, which I know my daughter participated in that program and she wants to be a writer. And because of that influence, now she is interested in writing about agriculture and equine and all of that different industry. And so, but it's before being exposed to that, she would not have even considered that as an alternative. And
Right.
so
Sharon, to your point, Locust Trace has expanded its work down into the elementary school. It typically was when it first opened, set up for high school students. They have now, Ann DeMott is who we really need to bring on this group to talk about her work and her partnership with BCTC to expand, again, Locust Trace Farm, which is a Fayette County Public School program, and how she has really created a diversity and inclusion initiative to get more Blacks and minorities into the program. We've done partnership with the UK College of Agriculture through the Manners program for the past 5 years to expand Blacks into this space. So this is not new to us. This is not, and it's not a dead conversation because it's happening. The problem is you don't get the press and you don't hear about the data because we're talking about the disparities that's going on now. But there has been a great bit of work done in this space to increase minorities into that program as well as into the industry. But Ann, can speak more to that in her partnership with Kentucky State University and the aquaponics work as well. So a very, very deep dive into this surface level conversation would be needed with Ann DeMott, the principal.
And another thing that we're trying to do is we've started in the Woodhill area an international community market, as well as just a small garden that we're trying to do at the community center with the emphasis of exposing our elementary students, as Daryl Thompson was saying, exposing our elementary students to agriculture on a small level in partnership with some local farmers, as well as with some local teachers that are passionate about that, to get them to understand that there are sustainable foods that they can create within their own communities, but also ways that they can partner with other agencies and other communities and learn more about the overall industry and not just growing vegetables.
And I'm going to say this real quick. If we look at our geographical footprint, and you know where children live matters. All you have to do is look where there's food deserts. You can look where there's no place to go buy fresh fruits and vegetables. And again, these are systemic issues to me as a city. When you look at the layout of your city, where meeting the needs are predicated on supply and demand. If you don't have grocery stores in a part of your city where kids who can walk there and get the necessary healthy foods, I mean, how unintentional is that, or how intentional is that for systematic disparity? So again, those are things that are part of this conversation that I think we can't get lost, and that is what systems of racism, not just in jobs. I mean, you're talking about where children live matter in areas of high concentrated poverty that don't have the basic necessities that you go one block over into Ashland, and there's a good food store or something that could provide those things. So we have to be very mindful to not allow the narrative to shift around what systems are causing these disparities.
Okay, Bishop, I saw your finger. Then I need to give some time to you, Sharon.
So, I was going back to what Marcus was saying and about there's a program, and I'm just going to reflect on some programs I know I was part of my youth. Was the it was STI, it was a Transportation Institute that was held over the summer at Kentucky State University. That was for I don't want to say it was either middle school or incoming high school kids. You had REAP, you had programs such as Upward Bound, and several other programs to where
I remember that one.
Some of it is based around education, but this goes back to funding, based around education, but also it was exposure to different career paths. There was a medical research when I was a part of at UK prior to my senior year. For 4 weeks, we stayed on UK's campus. I had no intention of being anywhere near a doctor, but I was able to be a part of the program. We went on different trips. We've seen corps where they open up. You understand. You able to see the brains, the intestines. You understand other scientific research dealing with the body and health, sports medicine, and I was just exposed to it. And I promise you, probably out of 50 kids that was in the program, maybe only one went into medical research. Same thing with the Transportation Institute. Maybe only 2 of us, or was even close to the same career path right now that's maybe related to it. And so it's just the point of kids having the opportunity to go to a program and telling them to go. I don't want to go and look rant and rave about it too, but I think a lot of parents that are currently involved with trying to structure their kid to, a lot of these kids too end up playing sports. And sports is so demanding now as far as time.
Yeah.
And people sit back and they make a choice.
Yeah.
Right. Which is unfair to the kid, demanding, but I think it blocks them a lot of times the exposure for some kids. And we got to realize too, I'm just making a PSA announcement, is basically people, you have to expose your kids where there's opportunity. Now we need the opportunities, but 2, make sure that you create some balance to that. But where are these programs? I have a high school kid now. I've been on the internet. You just don't see those even if I got to pay for it, you don't see it anymore. You just don't see it how it was before. I don't think you do, unless I'm missing it. I may need that help. But even the people that can pay for that, where is that? Where is that program at?
Yep. Well, excellent points made by all, and I think that coming out of this, that becomes something we discuss. We've got Marcus down to really look at some programs for us for young people. I think we need to talk more about that in our outcomes that we deliver. Sharon, how do you want to work through this piece? Because we've got about 25 minutes.
Well, are you ready to dive right into education, or do you want to take a minute to talk about?
I want to make sure I at least give you some time, so you dig right into it, and then if I have time left, we'll pick up the outcomes. I can just say we'll update the sheet, and people will know that data that's been requested has been received. We're working on the ordinance. Bishop and I have a copy of it now that we can begin to look at changing that goal to 10 to 15%. There's certain things that we've already got going. You hit yours first, and I'll fill in.
Okay, before we just deep dive, I wanted to make a comment, just piggybacking on Bishop. Bishop, I think that a part of the educational system needs to be educating the whole child and that whole family. And that's one of the things that I'm very passionate about, because all of the things that you're talking about, this should, in my opinion, should be embedded in our educational system, so that we're ensuring that we're providing those opportunities for children to learn and know what they're, because an opportunity is not an opportunity if you don't know it exists. It's a pipe dream. It's not even a pipe dream. It's not an opportunity at all if our students don't know that these opportunities exist. And so I think that goes back to educating the whole child while they are in that learning environment, and taking a good look at how are we doing that. Understand, and I agree with adding after school programs and things like that, but I just think it's important that we are equipping the children with what they need while they're in school. They're in school more than they're at home. And so making sure that we're doing that whole approach.
And if I could piggyback on that comment, Ms. Price,
Sure.
The student actually spends about 7 hours of their 24 hours at school, and the other 17 they spend at home. And we know that the first teacher and the first educator are their parents. And so the biggest impact that we're going to have on creating the whole child development is through great parenting. It's not going to be through a 7-hour educational program.
Agreed.
And so I have to speak up to say that we have to do a multi-generational approach to changing the outcomes of our communities and our families. And it starts at home. It does not start when they get to school. And again, at the end of that school day, when they leave and go back, they go back to the community. And so we've got to do a better job of ensuring that parents have resources to reinforce the things that the systems from an educational standpoint are providing as far as pedagogy and methodology. But again, those essentials come from home. And we've got to do a better job as a community and making sure we have families that make up good households.
And that's one of the reasons that I talk about it, educating the whole child, because if you don't take into consideration, we know that where a child lives matters, and putting that whole working together as a team and as a community to make sure that all of that happens.
I'm so sorry. Let's thank Allison for being with us today. I should she did a great job, provided a lot of great information for us to review later. And so thank you, Allison, for the way you shared with us today. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sharon.
Thank you. So one of the things, I'm going to move right on into the chart. When you guys had the opportunity to look at the chart, Patrice and I spent several hours, very good hours, working on the topics that we had discussed the previous week and how we could tweak those and change those a bit to turn into a recommendation that we would be ready to. Is Patrice back on the line? I thought she jumped off.
I think she said she had to jump.
I see her.
My internet is choppy. I just want everybody to know that I'm watching and I'm contributing when I can, but my writing. Thank you, team.
All right.
So last week we had quite a bit of conversation around universal pre-K and education for all children, birth to 5 years old, and what that could look like. And one of the things that we thought about when we were looking at some of the conversations that happened is we needed to change our approach, because if we were to look at the HANDS program to serve children under 2 years old, the HANDS program is a great home visiting program, but it doesn't allow for in-care child development opportunities for children under 3 years old. And so that would leave a huge gap of services for families that needed to be working. While we applaud the HANDS program and they do an outstanding job, we felt like that child development that in the child care center would be lost if we didn't take that into consideration. And so we have modified this because we would like education in our community to be actually community-wide. And so Patrice, you jump in whenever you would like to. But we talked about strengthening the early childhood education community-wide, including independently owned early childhood centers and through community-based partnerships, and including the school districts and school systems here, so that we have a complete system working together to make sure that children have quality early childhood education. So that, yes, go ahead.
The only thing I want to add, you're doing an awesome job. I would like for the committee and the community to really look at this as where education and economic development intersect. That this proposal is a model that is already working, where we can invest federal dollars into local small child care providers to help them provide excellent care for our children. And we could also save lots on transportation costs, increasing instructional hours. So I just want you to have that in your mind while you're, I don't want to bury the lead. I want you to be thinking about that as you hear it. Thank you.
Yes. And so during my conversation with Patrice, we were thinking about our charge as the committee and what the mayor has influence over and what the mayor has action over. And so and you see, we adjusted the chart to have that intersection of economic development and education, which a lot of our things are going to intertwine with each other. But we decided that this particular item was fit right in. And so we wanted to move it up on the chart in between economics and education, because really it crosses over into both. And so looking at an actionable item what action would be required of the mayor. And we're still developing this. And what we're asking her to do, because she doesn't have jurisdiction over KDE, she doesn't have jurisdiction over Head Start, she's not over child development centers, but she could enforce some influence for a conversation to be had. And so the action that we added on the chart was to enter into a conversation with FCPS to discuss the community benefit of offering full day preschool, expanded economic opportunity, and increased quality for community child care providers. So we want to spend a little bit more time looking at the entire system and how we can help strengthen each system when it comes to early childhood education, so that the overall community benefits from that. And so we're going to give that some more time, but that was one of the main things that we were working on. Patrice, the next outcome under education, you want to talk about the position as you envision it with the city's investment in education?
Very briefly, we are, I'm not sure if it came in because again, I'm on a day away. I didn't see the data, but we wanted to see all the money that the city of Lexington invests in education. And we have one person who is charged with directing that money on an annual basis, directing the city's investment. Right now, we're in a pandemic. We may have certain things that we really want to see done, so that we don't normalize who gets money, who they're serving. And we really want this person to spend all of their time focused on impact. Is what the city is doing with their money making an impact in closing achievement gaps? Because obviously the city is making investments, we're doing things, but if we're not making a change, we have to figure out where the systemic problem is and where we can make adjustment. So I feel like previously they more than that dollars.
Patrice, you cut out. We didn't get to hear what you said.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so those are some things that Patrice and I are going to continue to work on, and over the next week for our next meeting. But Aaron, we would like to hear from you guys and the work that you've been doing over the last week. If you could give us a brief update, that would be great.
So as it pertains to outcome 2, a whole family approach, Rochelle and Daryl and I have not met yet on that yet. There are some readings that we're going to look into, but really figuring out how this interfaces with the mayor's office, I think, will be our challenge. I mean, there's obviously things that we can recommend and will, but I don't know if Daryl or Rochelle want to add anything.
Yeah, I sent several resource documents to Ms. Price earlier today, a ton of them actually, particularly around the work that we're doing to support families, the dual capacity framework that we've done, some published documents that we worked with 9 other school districts across the country around how to support the whole family and the whole child. So I've given those resources that I will hopefully everyone will be able to see once they're loaded into the shared drive. I've also laid out some social emotional learning curriculums, K through 12, that we're rolling out to help support the whole child as relate to trauma and things of that nature. Some PBIS, which is positive behavior and improvement systems that we utilize with families to support the child. And then also JA, I've given you some articles and some tools around financial literacy and the programs we use within the system at the elementary level to support early literacy with families around financials, and JA BizTown. If you haven't gone to JA out on Spur Road, which is one of our buildings that we partnered with JA to allow them to structure this learning environment around financial literacy, you certainly need to do that. But I've given you a couple of articles that focuses on the success of that program. So far as in an update, I may have gone in the wrong direction, but hopefully I'm back. But I thought we were just going to gather all the tools and resources we needed to help support the outcome, and then determine whether or not those resources would drive us towards one of the top 3 recommendations to the mayor in this space.
We are working on just a tight turnaround time, and we are just trying to get everything done as quickly as we can, and accepting the data as it comes in, for it either to support the recommendation or not even the recommendation, because it's not a recommendation yet, it's a thought, because we're still working on this, to either support it and send us in that direction, or to say, you got to go in a different direction. So,
and so I would probably say, far as the collection of resources, I guess it will be helpful to determine, based on what we now know, whether or not that's even a space we need to spend our time in, if the work is substantial enough being done, or if an organization has shown evidence that there's enough being done in this space that we then can shift our attention to somewhere else. And so that's really what's my purpose was, to provide evidence that there was some level of authentic and impactful work being done. And if it's a need, do we need to make a recommendation to do more or do something different?
Good deal. Any of the other education team leads have any report or update that you'd like to provide to the full committee?
I just want to add that on the 3rd outcome, to ensure an educational community that is inclusive culturally and linguistically. I've had some conversations with some high school educators about standards, and just kind of some flexibility with standards and conversations on their own training, in regards to making their classroom and their curriculum inclusive. And so I'm working on identifying barriers from, what teachers are experiencing, and also kind of sifting through the data to not look at the number of minority teachers that are hired, and by gender, but then also to, can we get the data that shows the number of teachers that are potentially interviewed and not hired?
Yeah,
that's a pretty good yes. It'll take a little bit of time. We have to give a report, every school district, to the State Department. It's called the MER data, Minority Educator Recruitment and Retention. That report is given to the state board annually in December, that have those breakdowns. How many people in each of the categories were interviewed, how many declined, how many accepted. I have the data as it relates to the breakdown that was requested for Fayette County schools, and the percentage of, and I think I've sent that to Ms. Price as well. But if you want to just a quick overview of what those numbers are, I can share those now. Are you able to share your screen to get that pulled up? Let me.
I don't have that right in front of me.
Quinn, can you help us with that? Are you listening?
What was that? I'm sorry.
Daryl wants to share his screen.
Let's see.
Oh, should show up bottom middle of the screen.
I have a quick question while you're doing that.
Yeah,
Patrice got broken up at the end. So did I understand correct, Sharon, that you guys are requesting, or there's already a person that's going to monitor?
What Patrice is suggesting is that perhaps a position is created at the city whose whole whole focus is to keep their finger on the pulse of what's happening with education on all levels in Fayette County.
Mm-hmm. So that was one of the things kind of going into, hurry up, get back to Daryl. In different city organizations and different companies, there's people put in place that's supposed to monitor or be over the diversity and inclusion, or however it may be titled within these businesses. We need to come up with a way how to hold them accountable. And I don't want to say it from the standpoint of holding them accountable of threatening their job. I'm not about people losing their job. I'm about people just doing their job and holding other people accountable. That's the title that you was given. That's the cabinet or office that may have been created within your company. We need to just figure out a way of making them produce the data, and then making sure that they're monitoring their data, or if they're responsible to go out and make sure everybody's included, making sure that legwork is being done. So it's almost a little bit like what you and Patrice are saying, is hiring, creating a position to where somebody's monitoring the early childhood education, making sure this money is spent, and holding people accountable. But so I was just kind of making the comment now, there's, besides that position, there's other people in place right now, and we need to come up with a way to hold them accountable. There's a diversity and inclusion office now with the city. I know a lot of people's going out reaching for data, but there's a position there or office there now, and I'm not sure that if it's just for internal with the city, or if it's inclusive of, you know, internal and external. But just need to make sure that if that office is there, what are they providing? Are they doing their job?
Thank you.
Got you. We got
I
you.
don't know, but I think that what he's saying is very important. We need some recommendation of how to measure whether these positions are doing what we intended them to do, or if somehow the city has rerouted the direction of what we intended for some of these positions to do on our behalf as minorities.
And then Bishop, just to add to that, we weren't thinking of this as just an opportunity for early childhood education. We were thinking about this system-wide, to be inclusive of all educational systems. Daryl, you ready?
Oh, yeah. You all saw the data on the screen, and I can put it back up again. But I just want to speak real quick to the numbers that was requested, and that's the current breakdown by ethnicity. Now, they're working to get the school by school breakdown that these numbers roll up to, so that you can see by school what makes up the 8% of African Americans, or the 13% basically of the total minorities teaching force. But what can't be missed is the understanding. There's a ton of documents I've sent for you all to be able to look at that speaks to how do you get the workforce pipeline? How do you get the number of minority teachers out of the workforce if, again, we spoke to this last week, if colleges and universities aren't producing them? And there's some research, there's some data. I've given you some snapshots of our biggest top 3 universities when it comes to pushing out minority teachers: the University of Kentucky, University of Louisville, and you would think Kentucky State University. But the numbers that come out annually there are no longer the numbers that used to be when that college was set up as a teacher workforce pipeline. And so you talk about root cause analysis, and you look at why there may not be 12%, 14%, which you have to look at the population of Lexington is not about 14%, 12% Black. How can you expect there to be that same number of educators, particularly in this profession, if they're not in the pipeline? So we've got strategies. I've also sent you a 5-year strategic plan around minority recruitment and retention that looks at dedicated strategies around preparation, pathways, pipeline, as well as recruitment and retention, so that you all can then again look at that information to inform your conversations on whether or not this is an area we want to recommend to the mayor as a part of this plan. Because again, there's an extensive amount of work that goes into understanding the root causes of how you end up with the data that was just in front of you. So it's not as simple as saying increase 20 of these next year if 8 of them aren't even coming out of the pipeline. So it's important that you have that backstory for understanding what your recommendation and particular outcomes may be but I've tried to share as much as I can given the short time frame to get us to where we are.
Okay, and just for the information of the committee and as well as anyone else who might be watching, all of the documents that Daryl is referencing all of the documents that we're using for data collection and analysis will be included on a Google Drive that can be linked through the city's, Sharita, help me out where that link is going to be located.
It's located on the commission's website page.
Okay.
They can access it there.
And so that way, people that are following or have questions and may have comments that they would like to submit will be able to have that same data at their fingertips as well. Okay, so we're right about 3 o'clock. Anthony, you want to talk about, if no one else, Kim, do you have anything from your work with Patrice? Because I know that you guys spent several hours working through some things.
Go ahead, Kim. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think, and Patrice, are you able to get on right now, or? I don't know if she's.
I don't want to, but my sound is so choppy, I wouldn't do it justice today, Kim. Sorry.
I hear you.
If you want, we can wait, since, I mean, there's only about 2 minutes before we're getting ready to end, but we had a very good meeting and really worked through some options. Patrice came up with a great idea of even how this can be paid for through the city, through almost found money. And we'd like to be able to go over that in a little more detail to give it some more justice next week, if at all possible.
That's okay. No worries. Well, we tried very hard, and because our committee is so large, and when we bring guest speakers in, we want to make sure that we're using and getting the best from them and the most information that we can. And so our meetings are, we're trying. That's what I said at the beginning. We're going to try to hold it to an hour to each, but it's not working out for us at any of the meetings.
And you know, just a quick question: if it's possible, if any of this information, like that, maybe some of the guest speakers have, if they want to give it to us prior to, so we can review and maybe not spend as much time going through each piece of it, we might be a little more educated on being able to ask some questions and really kind of focus on what those barriers are that are coming up from that data, instead of just going over each little piece of the data, because time is going to be really of the essence here.
You're absolutely right, Kim. Absolutely. We'll make sure going forward that anybody that does a presentation will ask for it prior to.
That'd be great. Thank you.
All right, Anthony, you want to do a recap on the virtual town hall information that we learned about yesterday?
Well, you hold me honest on this. So we all of the vice chairs met with the co-chairs on yesterday, and we talked about the upcoming town hall. Now, we are the first committee, along with, I think, racial justice. We will all share the 28th. Remember, we asked you all to put that on your calendars at 6:30 p.m. The way that the format is set, there will be 7 people on the panel, and basically there will be 3 from our group and 3 from the racial disparities group. And then Renee Shaw will be the moderator of this town hall. There's a website or an email address, and I can't remember what it is right now, Sharon, so you'll have to help me, that people are sending their questions to, and that will be reviewed. They will try to look at all of those questions and put them in a format where there's generally, certain directions that they want to go. And that will inform Renee Shaw on what she asked the panel to discuss on each one of these committees. Now, of course, we're the first one out of the chute, so we're the lucky guinea pigs. But at the end of the day, there will be an opportunity for us to at least talk about to the community what we're working on to this point. Now, we have one person from this committee that we can bring along with Sharon and I, and the same is true of the other committee. So we have not made that determination yet, but you all will hear as soon as we come to agreement on who that might be. And you got to understand, we got 2 very big topics, and so we're trying to find someone who's got experience in both of those that would be able to help us, because we have no idea where the questions are going to come from. But that's the format. It's an hour and a half. I don't know how many questions will be asked of us or anything, but we look forward to the opportunity to share with the community and hear what's on their minds. Sharon, what did I leave out?
The only other thing that I would add to that is that if we would like, we want everybody that's on this committee to make sure that they're watching,
absolutely,
and that they're logged on during that meeting.
Yes.
So that'll help inform some of the conversations and work that we'll be doing as well. Does anybody have any questions about that we might know the answer to? Okay, so guys, it looks like our next meeting is July 31st at 1 o'clock again. And then Anthony and I wanted to run by you guys the possibility of having one additional meeting. July 31st was going to be our 4th meeting, but we're thinking that, and with you all support and agreements, we're thinking that we're going to need at least one more meeting to make sure, because just like Daryl said, he sent out a ton of stuff this morning to give everybody enough time to really be able to use that information and that data. So I guess what I'm asking is, would you guys be interested in that August 7th meeting, having that one meeting?
This is Patrice. I have a question about the format. I absolutely appreciate the information we've received from our guests. However, we have not delved into each outcome. And when we have people working 3, 4, 10 hours off meeting to get these outcomes ready, and then the group can't discuss them so we can mark it as done, I don't feel that that's best use of our time. So I'd be open to that meeting if we can table any further guests, that if your particular outcome needs to hear from an expert, I think you all could do that off camera so that when we come back, we are ready to actually, get into the meat of these outcomes and make sure it's something we can agree on to mark as done.
And can I piggyback on Sister Patrice's recommendation there? And so if we could drop
Muslims don't talk about pigs, Daryl. Thank you.
I missed that. It broke up on me. So if you'll put a column beside each one of the outcomes and mark them red, yellow, green, we could progress monitor the status, because we won't be able to get across all of these. And some of them are further ahead than the others. So we could either mark it as complete, ongoing, or something. But red, yellow, green is a fairly common understanding for the public for where we are if we either touch something and hadn't got started, or have started something and finished it. Just a recommendation.
Thank you. Yes, Senator Thomas.
Yeah. Sharon, I'm just trying to get clear on where we're going here. Are we planning to wrap up our work by August 7th? Is that what you're saying?
No, she's saying we'd have another committee meeting on the 7th. The date has not been determined yet on when we need to turn in the materials to the mayor to review. We have at least another week to do that. I think what Sharon wants to make sure that you all understand, and what we both want to make sure, is that these are two very, very big topics, and it was just hard to get all of this in 4 meetings. And so for all of us to do what we feel is doing justice to the work, we know we need to put more time in. And I think that's the point she wants to raise. And certainly at this point, we want to add another meeting, and we'll see where we are at that point. We may need to add another one after that if we're not where we need to be. But I think Sharon wants to make sure that the idea is at least in your mind that we do that, because there are two guests scheduled to come next week as well.
Anthony, sure. I guess here's my position. I am definitely available for an August 7th meeting. So I want to let you know that I am definitely available. However, I do want to go back to Patrice's point. I think we need to have at least a 2-hour meeting to talk about, what our recommendations are going to be. So
I agree.
I would say even after August 7th, there ought to be a 2-hour meeting or more, 2 hours or longer set aside, just so we can agree on what our recommendations will be.
Yeah,
That's my opinion.
if necessary, what in my mind, I'm thinking August 7th is that 2-hour meeting to go over the outcomes that we have and whittle it down to where we need to be. If we need more time than that, then we can take that. Yes. We don't have any guests scheduled for the 7th. That's just us working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm wondering, do we need Quinn to add that additional meeting of August 7th?
Sharon,
What do we need
I've
to do
looked,
with that?
Sharon, I've looked at the Google Sheet and August the 7th is open. If the subcommittee agrees on August the 7th as an additional meeting date, we would need to select a time today.
Let's propose 1 o'clock like we've been doing. Will that work?
And 1 o'clock is open.
Good.
We'll take it.
Is that okay with committee members?
For me, 1 o'clock after this week becomes a problem because I will be working in schools, and schools will not, virtually in schools, and I'll be back at work during this time of day.
Does anyone else have a conflict? Sister Patrice, I'm gonna have to work with you a whole lot behind the scenes so we can get it going. And how we need to move forward and things like that. But it looks like the majority of the group will be available August 7th at 1 o'clock.
Can I suggest at that time we narrow down our focus? I mean, again, we've been charged with a lot, but we didn't have to take on a lot if we know what we truly want to be working on. And I've heard you talk about early childhood, the family, and it sounds like if we wrap our educational work around those pieces, we may be in a space where we can begin to focus our attention on what the mayor could potentially address when it comes up to supporting education. And that way we're not continuing to go down rabbit holes about a whole lot of stuff, but at that meeting, we can then get more laser focused on what we're close to being our recommendation, if that's amenable to everyone.
I would see that as the intent of that meeting, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody know how we're doing in comparison? I mean, is are all the other committees having the same issues?
I know that some of the other committees are meeting twice a week. I think it is law enforcement, maybe. I think those guys are meeting twice a week. But for us, we're the only committee that has these two big topics on the same committee. And so I think that is what's making it a little bit more challenging and a lot more work behind the scenes that has to happen as far as data collection and working together and doing all of those things. Because those are two giants that this committee is charged with. And so we're trying to make sure that we're trying to have as good of a balance as we can so that we give respect to both of those. And while respecting everybody on the committee and the community's opinions and, trying to do what's best for the community as well in this process. If that answers your question.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody else have anything before we adjourn the meeting? Okay, then we'll need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
A motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor indicate aye.
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 Any opposed, same indication. Okay, the meeting is adjourned at 3:11 p.m. Thank you guys and have a great weekend.
Thank you, everybody. We appreciate you.